Thank you very much. It is an incredible honor to be able to talk today, and I think this is my third or fourth time here at CanBIM, being the first one 10 years ago, or 9 years ago. I have two colleagues with me, and I'll introduce them in a moment, but for me, to come here today and expand upon what we started touching upon last year, and for those who saw me speak last year, the main message was, when we think about all this BIM stuff, it's nothing but a collection of assets. A collection of assets where things happen to those assets throughout the life cycle. So what do you do with all that information? How does it come together, and how do you start to tap into bigger means of information and opportunity? So, to make these things happen, I'm blessed with the team that I have. I've got 11 people from IBI here today, and 2 of them speaking with me. And without the colleagues that I have, I really can't achieve and push for the things I'm trying to push for. So here we're talking about harnessing the eye for lifecycle data management. So to do that, we had to get all the way out of this design profession and enter Tyler, corporate data analyst. I needed a data guy. I needed somebody to come in and look at the stuff that we're doing and come in with a background of making data dance and then helping to inform decisions based on data. That's Tyler's background. Melisa comes to us. She's one of the BIM coordination specialists within IBI. That's my fancy word for BIM lead, BIM coord, or BIM manager, whatever semantic term you want. She helps to lead BIM on projects. She came from George Brown College, awesome BIM course, so kudos to George Brown for sending us Melisa. And she will help to talk about the technical solution. So what I'll do right now is I'll turn it over to Tyler, who helped us to rationalize why we did what we did. Then I'll talk about what we did. Let's hear from Tyler.
So thanks for having us. So what we've done is taken an existing solution that we have and tied in a BIM viewer. So those of you that are familiar with IBI know that we're the 6th largest architecture company in the world. We have offices in 63 countries, or sorry, cities. We aspire to have offices in 63 countries. That's where we're going. But we also have a very large technology practice. So we currently sell custom solutions to transit agencies around the world. And that's anything from ATMS systems, tolling systems, 511, 311, as well as asset management. So what we've done here is taken our existing asset management system that's used by the Department of Transportation down in Florida, as well as a few other smaller departments. And we've added a BIM viewer. So something that we talk about a lot at IBI Group is becoming a technology-driven design firm. And that, I think, is something that means going beyond project completion with design. So our CEO likes to stand at the window and point to a building across the street and say, we designed this building in the 1930s. A company that we bought actually did it, but we designed it in the 1930s, and we haven't had any involvement beyond the design phase, despite the fact that this building has gone through multiple major retrofits. And I think asset management for us means providing a value-added service to clients beyond design completion, and that's sort of where we're going. There we go. So the system that we're going to be showing you breaks down into some core features that exist in the asset management system that we have called MIMS. So the elevator pitch for this is we've taken a maintenance management system that allows tenants, maintenance professionals, and maintenance managers to use the BIM model to manage all of those activities, as well as financial information, to manage documents tied into each individual asset, warranty information, and a good bit beyond that. So it's a web application. It runs in the cloud out of our Tampa data facility, and it comes with a mobile app as well. Additional modules that we're currently working on, something that we've heard a lot from clients that we've talked to about this is it would be very interesting to look at space management and how that ties into the BIM model. So what departments in an office are situated where, and look at chargeback reporting and trying to automate that process. The benefits for me are pretty simple, and you'll see some of this in just a second, but just having all of your information in one place is very powerful for us. So having everyone involved, whether that's tenants, facilities managers, on-site maintenance staff, be able to access all of your documents, again, tied to elements within the BIM model, to look at financial information, which we track again through the BIM model, warranty information, etc. So what we're going to be talking to you about today is a pilot project that we did for ourselves. So we actually lease all of our assets. So whenever we go in and redo an office space, we will lease our tables, chairs, monitors, servers, all through a third-party provider. And historically, it's been very difficult to manage what came from where, when warranty dates sort of end, financial information, and all of that. And we've gotten a lot of value out of using the BIM model and our asset management system to do that. So without further ado, Melissa's gonna...
Well, let me take the next slide, and then I'll call on Melisa. Thanks, Tyler. So... So then we said, let's take on this challenge. So when I came to IBI, Intelligence, Building, and Infrastructure is what it stands for. I said, how awesome is it to have this intelligence arm that does stuff with information? So I said, what does that mean for design technology? What does that mean for the world of BIM? And for me, this graphic, which actually Melisa created about a year ago or so, sums it up really nicely for us. We've got an item, which is an asset, in a model. The BIM is nothing but a collection of assets littered with information, spatially aware. We've got to know where they are, what they are, and what they're doing. And the what they're doing comes from the host of asset information that's in filing cabinets, shop drawings, assembled through contract admin, thrown all over the place. So when we brought on Melisa, and it's been just over a year now, it was welcome to IBI. You learned BIM management. You're not going to touch Revit for a good long time, but you're going to help me get stuff out of Revit. So let's figure out how to do this. And by the way, there's this odd system we discovered by turning over many rocks within IBI, and we said there's a little bit of opportunity here. So that's kind of how she started, and she gave me a look of, okay, we'll see what to do. But Melissa's going to talk through what we came up with.
Okay, let's take a quick run through the asset management system. So what we did was establish 4 stages for the service. The first is the BIM Model Preparation, where the main objective is to prepare all the data that is going to be populated into the internally developed asset management system. What means prepare the BIM model in IFC generic format and the asset information. Once we have this, the developers can start with the instance creation, with the system orientation to the final users, and the system maintenance. So for the BIM model preparation, the first step is to review the BIM model. We firstly implemented the system in an IBI office. So we took the design originally done in 2D, and we went from 2D CAD to 3D Revit, ensuring that all the assets that we wanted to track had a unique element ID. So now the question was, what has to be BIM? And we look at the assets that we wanted to track in our office, and it was essentially all the furniture. The tables, workstations, chairs, the laptops, lighting fixtures, everything that was going to be leased as an overall asset, so we modeled them accordingly. And this is something that we have to think about when we are going to present this as a value to a client, because we need to know if we have a BIM model. Because if we have it, perfect, but if we don't, like in this example, this could represent a potential extra cost to be sure that all the assets that we are going to track are represented into the model. So once everything has been modeled, we then export it to generic. So we went from Revit to IFC, like from the BIM authoring tool to the generic world. So you can now connect the asset management system that works with an open source viewer. And as we can see here, the element ID is there, but also a second code is generated that is the GUID. And this was crucial to establish a consistent link between the asset management system and the BIM data. And finally, the work was done in parallel to gather all the information required related to all the assets that were included into the project. So these were the manufacturers, the leasing date, purchase date, the schedule, like maintenance and schedules. And once we had all these two essential pieces, the IFC and the asset information, we populated into the system, and it was ready to go. And now Brent will show us the preview of the overall solution.
Thank you, Melissa. So a couple comments before we get in the system. So one thing Melissa said, if there wasn't a BIM, we created a BIM. So in parallel to this, we've been working with a lot of scan to BIM technologies to find that right outfit or the relationship where we can assess the value or the labor required to go and actually do the labor of generating a model or getting a proper quality scan that gives us asset-rich models. And that's the critical thing. I don't want a bunch of point clouds. I can't really do much with that. I want to have a building information model of my assets. Don't care if it's Revit, EcoSim, ArchiCAD, Vectorworks, it just doesn't matter. I want something that I can get out of an authoring tool into the system. The other question, and I always joke with my Revit colleagues, is the tempering the big bucket of Revit, because you can jam everything you can into there, but it's actually tempering what needs to go in there and why. So we spent a lot of hours going through what we put into this Revit model as parameters versus what we put in an import sheet to go into our system versus what's already existing in the other locations and where they all have to glue together. So the system itself, what we looked at is we had something existing in a web portal, looked something like that. You can go and access all of the assets. So once the import occurred, the developers went and grabbed a generic IFC viewer, BIMX, that they were able to interpret, dissect, and infuse into the asset management system and tie the element GUID from the BIM authoring tool to the asset records generated within the system itself. And that allowed us to both harness the navigation capabilities of the BIM viewer, the unique identities of the assets themselves, and the connection to the overall asset record that exists in the system. And that overall asset record then allows us to access various points of information, including warranty information, financial data, linkages to shop drawings, owner's manuals, all of the other items that would be in an online repository, and then report against the assets to allow us to either dashboard against the various KPIs if we plug them into the system, or just simply get show me all my assets that are scheduled for a return in the coming year. Now, before I go to the next slide, last year I talked about the genetics of an asset, and I was very inspired by that. This helps us to assess our assets in our office space to see when is the right time to replace an asset before the replacement of the asset becomes more costly. So that asset genetic curve allows us to look and say, if I replace an asset and I have resale value, the cost is less for me, the replacement may be easier. If the asset is completely failed, maybe I have to have an expense to dispose of it, plus replace it, and then it will be an urgent replacement. Therefore, I need a quicker lead time, and therefore the cost is increased, and it's just astronomically different. So we can assess and balance all of that based on outputs by our reporting with the visual adeptness of a BIM model behind the scenes. Now, we worked with buildings, and we said, this is an excellent start. So once we were finished, our facility manager for this space is able to have system and space side by side with exact cohesion, if you will. And they can access the information. This is talking about the television set there, edit the information, view the details straight into the system. If I didn't have my system with me, we have the ability to use the mobile device. Now, Melissa loved me for this one. I said, great, now that we have all of these assets, let's generate barcodes for every single one and go and attach them on. So this was the initial testing we did, but then we ended up printing and affixing it. It's craziness, but it was fun. Point is, with the phone, Android, iOS, doesn't matter, scan the barcode, access the asset information, enter status updates, enter social data. And this is the critical piece for me. I'm now starting to track what the users are having to say about our assets. And this, and it'll tie into the end of this presentation, but this is now getting beyond the realm of what did we design, what did we construct, and what are we doing with it. Now it's how is it behaving, what's the feedback, is there consistent feedback, is that TV breaking consistently in all of its applications or maybe just in this room? Does this room have a temperature problem, a lighting problem, or is the manufacturing just wrong and we should never spec that again? So I can start to look at information based on how our users are entering data into the system. But then we said buildings aren't enough. So we took one of our infrastructure models and we said, let's tie this together. Because the system coming from the transportation side already included a mapping capability. So augmenting the workflow that Melissa described, we went Civil 3D to IFC, equally inroads, open roads, anything else to IFC. And then the challenge on this was taking thousands of assets scattered along a 12-kilometer route and identifying a latitude, longitude of them all to show up in the mapping range, and then harnessing the same BIM viewer capabilities of the IFC file, connecting the asset GUID that comes out of Civil 3D to its asset record here within the system. Now, I kept referencing the GUID, and I don't know if we made that point, but the GUID is so explicitly critical because the generation of the IFC maintains that GUID, so as the model continually upgrades, the GUID doesn't change. So how do you break this? That telephone pole that's being identified, somebody goes back in the model, press deletes, and puts a new one in. Got a different GUID, BIM coordination comes into play to fix the error. The ideal situation is that entity is never deleted, it's continually updated, and we have a proper workflow of authoring tool into asset management system. So this was an awesome achievement for us earlier this year to actually infuse the horizontal full 3D model into the system and allow us to start to manipulate those types of assets. Now, barcoding these would be fun because you might not be able to reach all these assets. So our intelligence sector is looking at, intelligent barcoding, I always get it wrong, but where you can actually walk with your phone and get pinged on where barcodes are within your vicinity, and then select those barcodes and access the information. And I'll remember the name, of course, later. So the result, we have a centralized live system focused upon this asset management system, custom developed internally, exposed globally via the internet for everybody to consume. It has within it security capabilities to augment how you see the data depending on what you're trying to see. So the BIM coordinator, the facility manager want to see a lot of things. But if we have an issue with the lights and we put in a trouble ticket and we say something's broken and needs to be fixed, expose that ticket to the external world, and the repair person will get pinged and they'll access the information, only seeing the assets that they have rights to see, all of the lights. And they won't be able to interact or adapt with any of the other data, which we don't think they should be able to see. So those, we call them contract groups in the system, but it's basically security groups for data. So this is the last slide, and I pulled this up last year, and this is the critical thing. Last year I said we've got to get out of the BIM authoring tool. It's the most critical thing, harnessing open BIM technology in alignment with ISO standards, building smart, and what's happening globally to get us out of the confines of any one specific software, letting us harness whatever we want to author through generic, as Melissa described, in the realm of asset management, and then we get the Tylers of the world to start to make our data dance, to take the data of the asset, the social data, how many tickets, what are the breakages, why and how, and what are the conditions, and what information should I learn from in order to help adapt what I'm doing in the design world, but equally in the other direction, pushing into smart cities and the Internet of Things. All this data is now tied. So on my phone here, I should be able to access the information of our office and make inquiries and adaptations to the information housed on those assets, to the point now where Melissa and I are starting to look at how to make those assets start to respond to the information that's being added to those. So IBI has another project where we're developing a bot to interface with BIM. So it's a BIM bot, and we're going to work on that name. But the idea today is it's helping us mitigate clashes. So it sees that a beam is hitting a wall or a beam is hitting a window. Let me get to that structural and architectural lead and get them to mitigate and make them mitigate and track the resolution and feed it back. Very focused. So I want to expand that now to the point where can I start to access and analyze all this data and actually make the physical inert assets respond to the users. So as we come in the room with our iPhones and Apple Watches, and all of a sudden the space knows we entered the room, the space knows all the assets in the room, all the information about the assets. The space can also analyze what's happening and what has happened to those assets. Then if it could look into my outlook and my preference and the information that I've said, I like a room to be tempered and dark and I want the chairs to be configured, can we start to make spaces and rooms and physical inert assets adapt and change to respond in an artificial intelligent manner to the users that are coming into the system, into the space, and that comes to this realm of data being a communication mechanism, honing us together, allowing this fusion to this world of perpetual connectivity to the things we do every day. Thank you. Any comments or questions? Yes.
Regarding the update for the column example that you provided, what about the history of this equipment? Is it kept for if you want to have it for reference later?
Yeah, so that's good. So that's why the comment I made about never deleting, continually augmenting, right? So most either document control systems, document management, or this system tracks the version control of change. So as long as, and that's the biggest break in the digital world, is if you delete a record or retire and make a new and never bridge the two, you lose that. So that's very important to have that history, because without the history, Tyler will come in and say, okay, let me look at this asset. Okay, this asset's brand new. And I'll say, but no, the asset's 10 years old, but there's no history of information. So that's very important. Can I pick on IBIers for questions? No? Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. We'll be around for questions.